You think they have moved on. Maybe that is the story you have been telling yourself, because the alternative, that they are still there, still thinking, still carrying something they have not addressed, is more complicated to sit with than the clean narrative of mutual departure. Or maybe the story was handed to you by their behaviour, by the silence, the distance, the apparent ease with which they seem to have absorbed the absence of what existed between you and continued functioning, continued living, continued moving through the world without any of the visible markers of someone who is struggling with a loss. And yet, something keeps happening, small things that individually could be explained away and collectively form a pattern that your nervous system registered before your rational mind was willing to name it. The patterns in how they still orbit, the specific, particular, unmistakable signs that the avoidant who appears to have moved on has not. In the most honest sense of the word, moved anywhere. They are still there. In the specific way, the avoidant is still somewhere, not loudly, not demonstratively, not in any form that announces itself clearly enough to be confronted or addressed or built upon, but present, in the behavioural residue of someone whose interior has not completed the process their exterior is performing. The obsession is real, and it is showing, in every way except the one that would require them to admit it. First, what obsession means in the avoidant context. Because the word carries connotations that do not map cleanly onto the avoidant's actual experience, and using it without precision creates a picture that misrepresents what is actually happening. Avoidant obsession is not the anxious, pursuing, intrusive preoccupation that the word usually evokes. It does not express itself as constant contact, does not produce the avalanche of reaching and checking and needing to know that other attachment styles generate when they are unable to release someone. It is quieter than that. More interior, more contained. What it is, specifically, is persistent involuntary return, the mind going back, not by decision, not because the person has chosen to think about you, because the internal system that was supposed to have filed you away has instead kept you in active processing, returning to you in the spaces between other things, finding you as the background content of unguarded moments, discovering that the deactivating strategies have not produced the expected outcome of genuine diminishment. You are still there, in the active layer, in the place where only things that have not been processed to completion reside. And the avoidant, whose entire architecture is organised around the management of internal experience, finds themselves unable to complete the process they are performing completion of. This discrepancy between the performed moving on and the internal remaining is what produces the signs. The behavioural leakage of an interior state that is not matching the exterior presentation. First sign, the one that appears earliest and that tends to produce the most confusion in the person who experiences it. They maintain a specific kind of peripheral awareness of your life. Not surveillance, not the intrusive, frequent monitoring that would announce its own desperation. Something calibrated, measured. The specific amount of attention that keeps them informed, without the informing becoming visible as the intentional act it is. They know things about your life, your general movements, the broad strokes of what you have been doing, in a way that would not be possible if they had genuinely withdrawn their attention. And when something significant happens in your life, a change, an achievement, a difficulty, something that anyone who genuinely knew you would register as significant, they know. Not always in a way they would acknowledge, but in a way that shows, occasionally and in small ways, in how they interact with you if interaction occurs, or in the strange accuracy with which they seem to understand your current state from a distance. The peripheral awareness is maintained at exactly the level the system can manage, without the maintaining becoming evidence of the obsession. Too much would reveal, too little would require actually disengaging, which the system has not been able to do. So the monitoring settles at the precise threshold of deniability. But deniability is not the same as absence. The monitoring is happening. The awareness is being maintained. Someone is paying attention to you, from a distance that was supposed to have foreclosed that attention. The attention is the obsession. the specific, calibrated, perpetually maintained attention of someone who told themselves they had stopped. Second sign, more specific, more behavioural, less ambiguous when you know what you are observing. They respond to things you did not direct at them, the communication that was not intended for them, the post, the passing mention in a mutual context, the thing said to someone else that found its way to them through the ordinary channels of shared social proximity, produces a response. Not always immediate, not always explicit, but traceable. The reference to something you said that demonstrates they received it. The reaction to something you did that could not have been a reaction if they had not been aware of it. The acknowledgement, however indirect, of content from your life that they would not have access to if they were not paying the quality of attention that the peripheral awareness produces. This sign is significant not because of the responding itself, but because of what the responding reveals. The system that was supposed to have moved on would not be receiving these signals, would not be in the position of receiving them because it would not be in the position of monitoring the channels through which they arrive. Being in the position of receiving them, being oriented, however peripherally, toward the source of information about your life is the evidence. The response is just the leak, the position is the obsession. Third sign. This one lives in the quality of their reaction when your name is mentioned in shared spaces. Something changes, a quality of alertness that is different from their response to other names. A slight shift in the attention, the physical version, the way the body orients toward things that matter, that is controlled but not entirely suppressible. An increase in the quality of their presence in the conversation that did not exist a moment before and does not continue with the same intensity after the conversation has moved elsewhere. Their name response to you is different from their name response to other people. Not dramatically, the management is too practiced for dramatic, but in the subtle, physiological, nearly imperceptible register that people who are paying close attention can detect. You register somewhere in their nervous system that other names do not register, and the nervous system, whatever the management strategies are performing on the surface, does not lie at the level of these small, automatic, precognitive responses. Something moves in them when you are referenced. Something that has not been neutralized by time or distance or the performance of having moved on. Something that still, despite everything the system has deployed against it, responds to the specific frequency of your existence. The fourth sign is in how they handle mutual connections, specifically in the particular interest they take in the people who are close to you. Not in a way that announces itself, in the way that someone who is maintaining information about you through the peripheral channels would naturally engage with the people who are part of your circle. A quality of specific attention to what those people share. A careful orientation toward anything those people might reveal, inadvertently or otherwise, about the current texture of your life. The mutual connection who mentions you receives a level of engagement from the avoidant that the subject matter, independent of its connection to you, would not typically generate. Questions that are not quite about you, but are adjacent to you. An interest in the details that only matters if the details are being filed in the context of the larger picture of who you are and how you are right now. They are gathering information, not aggressively, not in a way that would alert anyone to the gathering. In the practiced, subtle way of someone who has learned to maintain a quality of knowing without the knowing becoming evidence of the maintaining. The gathering is the obsession. It is the behavioural expression of a system that has not been able to stop caring about the answer to the question, how is she? How is he? What is happening with the person I told myself I was done thinking about? The question is still running. The gathering is how it gets answered. Fifth sign, one that produces some of the most confusing interactions in the post-avoidant landscape. They make contact for reasons that do not justify the contact, the pretext, the forwarded article that is technically relevant to something you once discussed, the question that could have been answered by anyone but was specifically brought to you, the check-in that is framed so casually that it almost succeeds in performing the indifference it is trying to establish, almost, except except that the specific timing of it, the specific content of it, the specific care with which it was constructed to seem uncalculated reveals the calculation. The avoidant who has genuinely moved on does not manufacture pretexts. The system that has completed its deactivation does not produce the reaching impulse that requires a pretext to execute. The impulse exists before the pretext. The pretext is built after the fact to give the impulse a cover that makes it deniable. The cover being constructed is evidence of the impulse that needed covering. The pretext being required is evidence of the reaching that needed disguising. The carefully casual contact is evidence of a not casual interior state that the casual framing is working to conceal. You are being contacted. That is the fact underneath all the framing. The specific person who was supposed to have moved on is finding ways to make contact that do not expose how much making contact matters. Sixth sign, temporal, specific, related to the pattern of when the contact or the signs appear rather than their content. The timing corresponds to your significant moments, birthdays, transitions, visible changes in your life. The points at which your life is demonstrably shifting, new beginning, meaningful ending, visible arrival at something that people who know you would understand as significant. The avoidant whose obsession has not resolved tends to make their presence felt at these junctures. Not always directly, not always with the contact that would make the timing undeniable. Sometimes in the peripheral awareness, becoming slightly more visible. Sometimes in the mutual friend mentioning they came up. Sometimes in the response to something posted that has the timing of someone who was watching for the moment. The timing matters because it reveals the specific quality of attention required to produce it. Responding to the significant moments in someone's life requires knowing when those moments occur. Knowing when those moments occur requires paying attention to the texture of their life, with enough consistency to recognize significance when it appears. The obsession produces the attention. The attention produces the timing. The timing produces the moments where the performed distance develops a visible crack. The seventh sign is one of the most honest and least often named. They have not replaced you. Not in the sense of being alone. The avoidant may have other connections, other interactions, other people in the periphery of their life, but in the specific sense of having found the person who occupies the relational space you occupied. The person to whom they talk in the specific way they talked to you, with whom they reach the depth that was available between you, who receives the quality of attention and interior access that you received. That space is not filled. Not from the outside necessarily. The outside may look like ordinary continuation, like a life proceeding normally without visible deficit. But in the interior architecture, where the claiming happens and where the genuine relational investment lives, the space that was yours has not been reallocated, has not been given to someone else, has not been filled by the ordinary accumulation of new connections that typically follows the end of a significant one. The space remains, occupied by the residue of what was there, by the ongoing processing, incomplete, unresolved, perpetually returning, of someone who has not been adequately replaced because the interior already ran the replacement calculation and returned a result the management strategies did not expect. The result was that replacement was not straightforward. That what existed between you was specific enough that the general category of new connection could not approximate it. That the particular frequency of your existence, the specific combination of qualities and history, and the unique interior that only you bring, had settled into the avoidance nervous system in a way that generic continuation could not displace. The unfilled space is the obsession's home. And it remains unfilled because the obsession is still resident. Eighth sign. This one is in the rare moments of unguarded contact, the interactions that were not planned, not managed, not arranged with sufficient preparation for the full management protocols to be in place. They are different. The accidental encounter, the unexpected contact in a context neither planned, the moment where the distance they have been maintaining met reality before the system could construct the managed version of itself. In those moments, something shows that the distance has been performing, a warmth that is more immediate than the managed temperature would produce. A quality of recognition in the eyes, in the voice, in the physical reality of two people who know each other well, being suddenly in each other's actual presence, that the management strategies did not have time to contain. It does not last. The system catches up. The management reasserts itself. The temperature returns to the controlled level, but the moment that preceded the reassertion, the unmanaged moment, the moment before the performance resumed, carries information. The warmth that appeared before it was controlled was not manufactured. The recognition that showed before it was suppressed was not performed. The brief, genuine, management-free quality of someone who has not moved on, encountering the person they have not moved on from, in the moment before they remember they are supposed to be someone who has moved on. That is the real data. Everything after is the management of the real data. The real data is the obsession. Ninth sign. Interior and only inferable from behaviour, but identifiable. The conversations they have with you in their mind have not stopped. The evidence of this appears in small ways. In the positions they take on things you once discussed. Positions that have moved, that show the influence of your argument, that carry the fingerprint of a perspective being integrated over time, through ongoing internal engagement rather than single-point exposure. In the questions they ask when contact does occur, questions that are too specific to be new, that have the quality of someone picking up a thread they have been holding privately for some time. In the references to things from your conversations that were not significant enough to remember, unless they had been returned to often enough to deepen in significance through repetition. The returning to your conversations, the internal replaying, the continued engagement with what was said and what it meant and what might have been said differently, is the mind's version of the obsession. It is the intellectual and emotional processing of someone who has not completed the process, who is still in the interior laboratory of their own thinking, running the experiment of what existed between you, still extracting meaning from it, still encountering new implications in old exchanges. The mind returns to what it has not finished with. The returning is the evidence of the unfinished, and the unfinished is the obsession in its most honest, most private, most entirely not for anyone else to see form. The 10th sign requires stepping back to see the whole picture rather than its individual components. The pattern of their behaviour across all of the above adds up to something that no single element produces alone. Taken individually, each sign has an innocent explanation. The peripheral awareness could be ordinary mutual network proximity. The pretext contacts could be genuine practical needs. The timing of their appearances could be coincidence. The unmanaged moments could be ordinary social warmth. The unfilled space could be explained by the ordinary difficulty of forming new connections at a certain age or stage of life. Taken together, they form a picture that the individual explanations cannot accommodate. The picture of someone who is organised, below their conscious awareness and below their explicit behaviour, around you, who has not released the internal space you occupy, who is maintaining, with the specific, calibrated, deniable but real quality of someone managing an obsession rather than completing a departure, an ongoing orientation toward your existence. The pattern is the evidence. The consistency of the pattern across time and context, and the variety of ways it expresses itself, is what distinguishes obsession from ordinary lingering. Lingering fades. It softens with time. It becomes less specific, less behaviourally consistent, less organised in its expression as the interior processes toward completion. This has not faded, has not softened into the general, has remained specific and consistent and organised in the particular way of something that has not been released because the interior has not released it. Now, the part that actually matters for you. What do you do with this knowledge? Because knowing they are still obsessed, still oriented, still carrying the interior reality of what existed between you, this is not automatically useful information. It can become the thing that keeps you stationary. The evidence that possibility still exists becoming the reason to wait, to hold open the door, to invest emotional bandwidth in monitoring the signs, rather than living freely in the direction of your own life. That use of this knowledge would be its worst possible application, and it would, with the specific irony of these dynamics, produce the outcome least likely to move anything forward. Because the avoidance obsession does not respond to being waited for. It does not convert into action when the other person is visibly holding space for its conversion. The system that is managing the obsession while performing otherwise is not moved by the discovery that the management is visible. It is moved by the same thing that moves avoidance systems in every other configuration of this dynamic. The genuine, unperformed, not organised around them life of someone who has their own forward momentum, who is not stationary in the orbit of the avoidance interiority, who has taken the knowledge of the obsession and done nothing with it, except perhaps allow it to settle something, to quiet the part of you that wondered whether what existed was real, before continuing in the direction of their own becoming. The obsession exists because what was between you was real, because the avoidance interior, which does not produce this specific, persistent, behaviourally leaking orientation toward people who did not genuinely matter, has accurate information about the quality of what you brought to their life, about the specific irreplaceability of your particular presence, about the gap that exists where you were. It is not nothing. It is not the ordinary residue of an ordinary connection. It is the specific behavioural and interior evidence of someone whose system was genuinely affected, genuinely moved, genuinely unable to complete the deactivation because the thing being deactivated was too real to be managed into neutrality. That reality is yours to receive, to let it settle into the place where doubt was, to let it replace the story, if you were carrying it, that you were not enough, not significant enough, not real enough to leave a mark. You left a mark, a specific, persistent, architecturally disrupting mark on the interior of someone who was built to prevent exactly that kind of mark from occurring. That is not a small thing, but here is the final truth, the one that holds everything else in its correct proportion. Their obsession is about them. What you do with your life is about you. The avoidant who is still oriented toward you, who is carrying the internal weight of what was between you, who is performing departure while their interior refuses to complete it, that person is in the middle of their own process, a process that belongs entirely to them, that you cannot accelerate or redirect or participate in from the outside, that will resolve or not resolve, will produce action or not produce action, will eventually find its way to the surface in either movement toward you or the quiet completion of the deactivation, on a timeline and through a process that is not available to your influence. Your life is not a holding pattern for their process. Your becoming is not on pause while they complete their interior work. The knowledge that they are still there, still thinking, still carrying, still oriented, is information about the reality of what existed, about the accuracy of what you sensed, about the legitimacy of the connection you invested in. It is not an instruction to wait. It is not a reason to hold still. It is simply the truth of where they are. And the truth of where they are has no bearing on the question of where you are going. Go, in your own direction, with the full knowledge that what you carried into that relationship was real and significant and worth carrying, not into the orbit of someone whose interior is rich with you, but whose behaviour has not yet found a way to honour that richness, but into the life that is still ahead of you, the one that does not require their obsession to begin, the one that only requires you.